I'm the older of my parents' two children. I have a younger sister, 26. I was an accident. My own mother told me so. She always told me so whenever I did something as a kid to disappoint her, which was often. The thing is, I was a good kid, well-behaved, never hurt anyone or caused any trouble. I just disappointed my mother because I existed, and that was a tremendous inconvenience to her. My dad always joked with me, in a way that was never the least bit funny, that I was a busted condom. My parents lived in a studio apartment when I was born and for the first 3 years of my life. They acted like it was my fault, personally, that they were so crowded and uncomfortable at home. They finally upgraded when my dad got a raise at his job. He worked at the post office, and he still does, which was just as well, because my sister was born. We moved into a 2.5-bedroom house. It was called a half-bedroom because it was designed for a desk, like a small office. Instead, that's where I slept. They were always different around my sister. They coddled and babied and spoiled her. Looking back on it all, it was almost comical in a tragic way. They'd always lavish money on her. She never wanted for toys or lessons for singing and dance and music. They always treated me like an afterthought and left me to fend for myself. I had shown a huge interest in music and often asked my mother for violin lessons. They always refused and told me it cost too much. My violin lessons would have been far cheaper than my sister's dance, plus art, plus singing, plus modeling. Seriously, classes. But I just didn't matter, and they showed it. Examples that come to mind were when I was in middle school and had the highest grade in my history class and had the chance to fly to Washington, D.C. to see the Smithsonian Institute with other high-achieving students. It was to be only a token charge, about $100, because the school district was footing the rest of the bill. My parents refused to sign the permission slip and refused to pay. Even when my teacher said that she could get my fee waived, they still refused, with some flim-flam excuse that I get sick easily. Total BS. When I was in high school, they didn't even bother to come to my graduation. I had 4 graduation tickets for people to sit in the audience, and my parents and sister decided they wanted to go on an early vacation to Florida that year as a reward for her 8th grade promotion. I was one of 4 salutatorians, which my parents used as an excuse to claim it wasn't important. It wasn't like I was the valedictorian. The only people in the audience for me were one of my older neighbors, 60 male, and his wife, 50s, whom I befriended and let me use their piano as a kid. My parents had no money for me to go to college, or at least that's what they told me. They had money somehow 4 years later for my sister to go to a dance academy. I took out a large loan at 18 and moved out of my parents' house. I majored in music in college. By my 3rd year, I had won a scholarship which paid for the rest of my degree. All through middle and high school, I played the violin. My mother and father never attended any of my school recitals. Not one. Not ever. When I was 22, I auditioned for our city's Philharmonic and won a seat. I began touring all over the country and playing in packed concerts. It was awesome and thrilling. I met my now wife, 33, a cellist, while on tour. She plays in the same orchestra as me. I went no contact with my parents. Just as well. It's not like they ever tried to contact me either. Aside from my wife, her family, and our 3-year-old daughter, I am without my own family. Or birth family at any rate. Those same neighbors who let me play their piano and sat in the audience for me at my graduation represented me at our wedding too. They had no children of their own, so it was nice for me and nice for them too. I often wondered if my sister were different from my parents and whether or not she would like to have a relationship. I wondered if she ever made something of all those singing and dance lessons. But no, she snubbed me just as I thought she would. Last I heard, she was divorced from her husband and is a single mother living at home with my parents. I'm not surprised that she never became a singer or dancer or mastered a musical instrument, because growing up, I observed that she had a mind-numbing lack of talent in any of these things. As the years passed, I earned the right to call myself the first-chair violinist. Oftentimes, I will be a featured performer with a pianist and an operatic singer. I have earned glowing reviews in classical music publications, and my face has been on posters as a highlight of the concert. I've never made huge money, but I make very comfortable money, and I am well known in classical music circles. Despite this, I've always eschewed social media, and Facebook especially. However, recently my wife told me that on the Facebook page for our city's Philharmonic, People claiming to be my parents were commenting on various pictures and status updates. I looked, and sure enough, my mother and father have a shared Facebook account. They've been trolling the Philharmonic's Facebook page, claiming that they're my parents and how proud they are of me, how supportive they've always been, and how much they love me and cherish me. A lot of my fellow musicians commented to my parents' comments how wonderful it was to meet them and how I never really discussed my family. It's true, and how wonderful it is that we're all friends now. And in fact, more than a dozen of my fellow musicians have friended my parents. Several of my fellow musicians have extended invites to my parents to attend concerts for free and tagged my wife on the invites because I don't have an account. My wife and I were curious, and we studied my parents' profile online. Their whole page is filled with references to me and my music, and how they always supported me and knew I would make it big. Cousins and aunts and uncles who I haven't seen in at least a decade are praising my parents for their selflessness and determination to see that I made good, and are lamenting what a shame it is that I'm so pretentious and think I'm too good to talk to them anymore. It makes me sick and angry. And yet, I do not want to get ugly, nor do I want to embarrass the other musicians in my group who are only trying to be nice. I am so furious with my parents, but don't know what to do. I do not want them taking credit for the accomplishments I've achieved completely without their help. Indeed, accomplished despite their active efforts to sabotage me at every turn. But I don't want our city's beautiful Philharmonic to turn into a crap show. It's already kind of awkward because people are asking me why I never talk about my parents, even though they're so nice, and why I treat my old former neighbors like my parents instead. I don't care what my parents think, nor do I care what my useless extended family of bozos and losers and users thinks. But I don't want my parents bulldozing their way into my life and trying to befriend my friends, and counting on me being classy to prevent their being called out on their BS. How to best deal with this? I really like the idea of having the Philharmonic Facebook admin blocking your parents. If someone asks about them, it is perfectly reasonable to say, I'm not in contact with my parents and would prefer not to discuss them, despite what you may have seen or heard on Facebook. They were never supportive. You could do something appreciative for your neighbors to thank them for all they've done, and your wife could also post pics and a thank you note on Facebook, explaining that they've been your #1 supporter since childhood, etc., when you had nobody else and no family. Sort of a backhanded way of letting people know that at least there is more to the story. We've only been together for 3 months. At first, I was flattered that she was moving things really fast. Like when we'd only been together a month, my parents were in town and she wanted to meet them. She introduced me to her friends very quickly, then her family very quickly. I happily shared that enthusiasm. She told me that in the future she wants marriage and kids. I reciprocated because I think those things are important to iron out. It's unfair to waste someone's time if they want kids someday and you never do. And she was already planning all these wonderful but expensive holidays, etc., which I kind of freaked out about, but only because holidays are such a treat for me. I can usually afford one every 2 years. Everything she was doing was sweet, and I took most of her questions as hypothetical. Although she's asked me a few times now how I'd feel about working in this country or that country, or taking a year's sabbatical out of work to go traveling with her. And at the time, I took these as just chats, so I said never say never. But I love my career. I only bought my apartment last year, happy in this city, and I'm already really far away from my family, and I don't want to be even further. It would take like a job even better than my current one to persuade me. Anyway, so on Monday, beginning of November, she's already stressing out about getting a Christmas tree for my place. I told her it's only the beginning of November, so there's no rush. She got a bit offended by this and said it could be a nice activity for us, so I obliged. Like, why not? Get the tree and decorations while they're cheap, right? She then rambled on about the specific color scheme we should get, and at this point, I really didn't care. Like, a Christmas tree is a Christmas tree, so I said her color scheme sounded good, etc. We took a stroll into town, and I said to her that I just want to buy 1 or 2 silly little decorations, like me and my sisters used to when we were kids. And there's this little Christmas decoration shop. We went in and I went straight to this cute little penguin, and I'd made my decision. She then got really intense and said, "But that doesn't comply with our color scheme." And I just laughed. So what? It's one tiny decoration. I didn't realize the rules were so strict. And she got all pissy. I bought my penguin because, well, I like it, and it is my apartment. When we got outside, she said, "Look, I know you probably think I'm being really anal about all this, but I felt like you purposefully went to the wrong part of the store against our chosen color scheme to sabotage our plan." So I got annoyed at this point and said, "That's just dumb, and that's a really strong and harsh thing to accuse me of. I just saw something cute and I thought I'd buy it." We then went dead silent for the walk to the next shop, and she was then pressing me about what tinsel on the tree, and she was annoyed that I wasn't enthusiastic, and I said, "You were quite mean and controlling back there, so, well, you've killed the moment really." We went outside, talked it out, and I told her that I'm not going to apologize for buying a cute little penguin I like, and that we don't need to have set rules, etc. for everything. She got quite annoyed. The chat then diffused, but none of us apologized to each other. When we got back to mine, I had a panic attack. I get those after any big epiphany. It hit me. I don't think we click. So I laid down, breathed so I was calm, and I calmly said to her that I'm not sure we click, and that she is beginning to get really overbearing and controlling. She told me I was giving her mixed messages over how fast I want the relationship to go. I agreed and said I'm being perfectly clear now. I'm happy with my job, happy with my life here. Never say never, but I have no desire to take a year out to go traveling. In my career, unless you're like at the top, it will be very hard to re-enter it after such a break. And that I am unlikely to move far away abroad unless it suits me, not her. She told me it was just chat and I don't have to decide now. I told her that I'm telling her now because she made comments before about how she doesn't like to be with a guy who just wants to stay in the same place, and I'm giving her the freedom to decide whether she can accept me or not. I then brought up the Christmas tree decorations. I told her that she made me feel like a naughty little boy in a shop, picking out the expensive action figure his mom said no to, or whatever, and that was out of order. She finally apologized. She got upset and asked if I still love her, etc., and I told her I do, but the whole thing has got me wondering if we still click or not. Bottom line is, I know you should run at any red flags, but I think she's a bit of a Monica from Friends, you know? Like, heart in the right place, very sweet, but just needs to be taken down a notch. But, like, am I going crazy, or is this Christmas tree decoration thing just nuts? Dude, you have been dating months. You need to slow this the F down, because unless your Christmas color scheme is red flags, this is concerning. Keep your penguin and leave this brat. To make a long story short, my 26 female breakup last summer with X1, 26 male, was volcanic. He's now expecting a baby with my stepsister within the next 6 weeks or so. Since I found out about the pregnancy, he's tried to get in touch with me 6 times through email, text, burner accounts, has tried to get mutual friends to talk to me for him, and showed up to my place once. The latter was the only time I humored him. He told me he was sorry, he loves me. He doesn't want to be with my stepsister and wants to get back together with me. I told him tough titties. He made his bed and now he's got to lay in it with her. I haven't dated much since July because of my life's implosion. But in November, a friend from college messaged me out of the blue. We hadn't talked in a long time. He, 27 male, referred to as X2 for the rest of the post. And X1 were good friends, but had a falling out over something fantasy football related the year after we graduated, and I stopped talking to him out of solidarity, or whatever. Anyhow, we go on a date, we click. We go on a few more dates. We become exclusive in early December. I was feeling really hopeful about this, until this morning. I was supposed to meet X2 at a New Year's party last night. He got there before I left the house and texted me saying that X1 was at the party and asked whether I still wanted to come. I declined and went to another friend's house and have a pretty good time. I tried calling X2 at midnight, but he didn't pick up. I didn't think much about it. Anyhow, I go to bed late, and when I wake up this morning, I have a message from X2 saying we're done. I couldn't even respond because he'd blocked me everywhere. I talked to a friend who was at the party the exes were at last night, and he said the two of them had spent a good chunk of time chatting with each other, but he didn't know what they were talking about. I'm not close with anyone else who was at the party, so I don't really have anyone else to ask. Like, okay, it was a 2-month-old relationship. I'm sad, but I'm not bereft. But the paranoid part of my mind is really concerned that X1 said something that resulted in X2 becoming X2. X2 has made it abundantly apparent that he doesn't want to talk to me again, and I don't want to push that boundary. But I'm so confused. I could contact X1, but I get the feeling that will open a floodgate of drama. I could also try talking to other mutual friends to see if they've heard anything, but I also don't really want to spread this as a rumor if it wasn't true. I don't know. I'm at a loss. Any advice here? I'm spiraling thinking that my ex is going to try to ruin every relationship I have for the rest of my life. Deep breaths. Do nothing. You're right. Any contact with X1 will bring drama, so sit tight. If your X1 interfered, the very worst thing you can do is overreact right now. X1 has been desperately trying to get your attention. Don't give in. Don't let X1 know he's got you right where he wants you. Inevitably, you'll learn more about what happened in time. Let it be. As awful as this is, remember that a man who will believe your ex after a few minutes of conversation over spending 2 months with you, without even speaking to you, is not a man to waste many tears over. If what you think happened is what happened, then your ex too has crappy judgment in people and not much spine.